You're watching The Movie Surgeon. Today we're looking at the documentary Amy. Subscribe and turn on those notifications for regular juicy content.
The music that speaks to me the most has always been jazz, always. It's always been jazz and that emotional connection to it, you know, that so many of the great singers had.
Amy is a 2015 documentary directed by Asif Kapadia, who before this was known for his hit documentary Senna. I haven't actually watched Senna yet, so let me know if that is something you'd like to see me make a video on. Going into this film, I was naive about Amy Winehouse. I was familiar with a few of her big hits like Rehab and Back to Black, and I remember her being in the news a lot when I was younger for having drug problems. My views on her were essentially created by news and comedians who used to take digs at her. I remember this Frankie Boyle joke in particular.
Did you see Amy Winehouse in the paper this week? My God, she looks like a campaign poster for neglected horses.
Now this clip was actually used in the doc, which I suppose reinforces my point. But what I'm trying to say is my views of her, along with many other people, weren't hugely positive, and people weren't really even in the know about who she actually was whilst she was still alive. I feel like the aim of the director Asif Kapadia was to reshape the public image of Amy by showing her story in a way that's not been seen before, and I believe he did achieve this. Hearing him speak about the process of creating the film is interesting. It seems as if he is discovering an Amy that he never knew, and in the same way that his audience would eventually go on to discover her.
What really affected us was seeing the young Amy material, how funny she was and how bright and full of life and cheerful and witty, really intelligent. I didn't know all of that, you know. And then you see that and it affects everything that comes after it because you've seen who she really was.
Spoilers. From this point onwards, there will be juicy spoilers. The documentary is made of archive footage, photographs, music and audio interviews which the director conducted with people around Amy, which along with archive interviews were used to narrate the film. I'll say now before I pick it apart, I think the film is very good. It's a seamless and well-paced documentary that I actually watched twice before making this video. I feel like this is down to the incredible editing. The film is essentially structured around Amy's songs, so we'd see a part of her life, for example a relationship with ex-boyfriend Chris and events surrounding that, and then we'd see a live performance with a song that's lyrics would match what was going on. One of my favourite examples of editing is when we see a montage of photos of Amy leaving a pub with one of her songs playing in the background, slowly revealing that she's back with her ex Blake.
That we're still friends. We're still friends.
So much incredible new footage really creates a strong narrative, and the researchers and editor have done a great job on the film. Some of the footage we see is shot by Amy herself or by the people around her, and this intimate look into her life shows a human side to her which we hadn't actually seen before the documentary, helping us to see a normal girl before the fame. Then later on in the film we get to see a very uncomfortable look at her drug addiction and downfall through the home photos and video. The film points towards many external influences which were essentially poisonous to Amy, the four main ones being Blake, the horrible ex-husband who introduced her to drugs and leached off her fame, her dad Mitch, who only seemed to come back into her life once she gained fame and then also leached off her manager and promoter Ray, who pushed her to do live shows while she was clearly not in a state to, and then there was the press who viciously hounded her for years and put her every move on every front page of every newspaper. These four entities, in my point of view, are portrayed in the film to have heavily played a part in the downward spiral that did eventually lead to Amy's death. Her on-off boyfriend, husband, demon, Blake, is introduced as a dark character. When he first appears, he's shown in slow motion, with a voiceover saying he's a womanizer. Then Amy says, "I fell in love with someone I would have died for." An example of foreshadowing Amy's death, a technique which the director has littered all over the film. Blake is portrayed as using her for the limelight. There's a shot of him with his hand around her neck on the red carpet, paparazzi saying, "By yourself, Amy," as if he's controlling her and soaking up her fame. But the very deliberate use of shots like this got me thinking, were all these events like that? Or has this just been edited to make me think that they were? Blake is clearly a 10 out of 10 scumbag, and you can't really deny that. But the film critic in me still doesn't like to be forced to make that decision. If I were to play devil's advocate, which is important to do when watching a documentary, I'd say you may well be able to edit the film to portray Blake as an unfortunate victim of fame and drug abuse and demonise Amy by doing things like putting Amy in slow motion with negative things said about her in a carefully selected voiceover. To me, it's interesting because in a way the director has become part of the story without meaning to or even being in the film. He's showing people who manipulate each other and use each other whilst perhaps doing that himself, which is ironically often the case in documentary and arguably unavoidable. Blake is portrayed as a source of evil which has poisoned Amy's life, and this narrative is really enforced through the types of shots used of him. I do wonder if the portrayal of their relationship is 100% accurate. The dad is also purposely portrayed as a leech, shown only really coming into the picture once she got big. The stuff he did in St. Lucia with the TV crew following him for his own TV show makes you appalled at him as a dad. But again, there must be hours of footage of him with Amy across multiple years, and it's edited in a way to show him as a bad force. It turns out that Amy's dad Mitch didn't actually like the final documentary, Amy.
It's a very agenda-driven film. It's incredibly biased, and it's manipulative. One of the things that Asif says is, he's made this film so that he can show how the media and the paparazzi and the press exploited Amy. Well, this guy has just won a BAFTA, a Grammy, an Oscar, and if he could, he'd probably win the Victoria Cross as well. So nobody has exploited Amy more than Asif Kapadia.
In response to Mitch's criticism, director Asif said they interviewed over 100 people and all the stories led to what was portrayed on the screen in the final documentary. The director Asif wants to show Amy as a free spirit. He shows an interview with her on the Jonathan Ross show when she says elocution lessons failed, and Ross describes her as being nicely common. The director wants to show these sweet things to then show how other influences took advantage of her and destroyed that free spirit. The point Asif made earlier about the importance of seeing home footage of Amy is key to the way he portrays her. This, mixed with extensive foreshadowing, mostly on the part of Amy, really builds a feeling of impending doom for the audience, who almost certainly know that she dies at the end of the film. For example, the interview by the big fish tank, where the interviewer explains that she's now essentially hot property for the press, and then Amy says she's not bothered about wanting to be famous. I feel like the director assumes viewers will at least know the basics of her story, so he's carefully edited it so the audience sees that she almost tragically predicted her own future and pities her.
I don't think I'm going to be at all famous. I don't think I could handle it. I'd probably go mad, you know what I mean? I would go mad.
On the surface, the documentary seems well balanced, and just tells the story of Amy's career as it happened. Even after what I said about the director's intentions, I do think that it's very tragic what happened to her. So I do agree with the narrative the documentary is showing. But you have to bear in mind that they condensed 10 years into 2 hours, so they still tell a very particular story. I really like the final act. Watching in hindsight as Amy is forced to perform to massive audiences whilst clearly completely out of it as the world laughs is now incredibly sad. I feel like Amy's death was handled well in the film. I think showing her body being carried out was powerful and created a very raw feeling with all romanticized feelings of a celebrity completely removed. At the end of the film, they explained what happened on the day she died, showed her funeral, and then the film ended, leaving the audience to decide in their own minds what her legacy is, even though the director has portrayed her legacy in a certain way throughout the film. Due to this documentary though, my view on her has changed massively. Since watching, I've been listening to her music, and I genuinely do have a different outlook on who she was. I'm sure a lot of other people also feel this way, and it's important to highlight the shift in attitudes people now have of celebrities with drug problems, when compared to when Amy was alive. And I think this has really helped with people perceiving her in a more human way. I do believe the director created a sort of dramatization of her life in the way he edited the film, but this isn't necessarily a criticism, as it evidently has an important message. Those elements of bias that I discussed do play around in my mind, but maybe those elements are important because they've helped me to see Amy as someone other than I previously thought I knew. If I was to rate this film, I'd give it a nice out of 10. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload, and check out my other videos. Cheers.